Now on ITV1, as we approach our 50th anniversary, let's begin a new series delving back into the archives for a celebration of television history. Relive some great memories with Those Were the Days.
I didn't know you were stood standing behind me, getting an eyeful.
What an eyeful? I don't look at me.
Oh, yes, well, I'll soon get perhaps I better have two.
Though much has changed over the last 50 years, we can be sure of one thing. With varying degrees of success, television has always tried, and always will try, to make us laugh.
And I went along for the interview and said, is this the interview for overdubbing crap early 70s foreign films? And the guy came to the door and said,
yes, come in. Sit down. So, want to overdub crap early 70s foreign films, eh?
Hello, I'm Peter Kay, and last year I won the prestigious City Life North West Comedian of the Year award, an excitement that very few people on this earth are ever allowed to experience. My life changed considerably. I discovered the truth, that bright lights do exist somewhere over that rainbow, and I awoke the sleeping giant of success and embarked on a 12-month trek of laughter, and I can't read this.
In 1955, Granada won the licence to broadcast commercial television to the north of England. The same year, the company bought a site for studios in Manchester's Quay Street. The next year, the year of Rock Around the Clock and the Suez Crisis, the station went on air.
Oh, so all right, got two cameras, eh? You've been spending your money. Hello, there's another one over here. Now keep them still, boys. Where are you? Well, it's very nice to see you, Quentin.
Arthur Askey, star of music hall stage and cinema screen, helped usher in the new age. And thereafter, comedy would become a staple of the British public's new ITV viewing diet.
You know, in my previous series and in the last series, I had a young lady from Blackpool called Sabrina. At least I christened her Sabrina. A bosom friend of mine, don't you?
Sometimes the jokes were scripted, sometimes not.
Getting back to this group, Ken, have you no ambitions to form a group yourself?
Love to with the boys.
Yeah.
The only thing is I'd have to change my name, you see. I'd have to have a name like Cliff or Rock, something earthy. Well, I don't know, eh?
Cliff Dodd?
No.
Rock Dodd?
No, let's invite suggestions for an earthy name for me.
Yeah, well, what about that fellow?
Sod.
Situation comedy was already big business in the United States, and we Brits followed suit. Take one studio, 3 sets, an audience, devise a situation, and then add the comedy.
What are you doing in here?
Oh, hello, Miss Pledge. Your Eli asked me to come back here for a bit.
Did he? Well, you're going to be disappointed then, isn't he?
Hilda Baker, you're of the mobile mouth. Mouth like an octopus on adrenaline or something.
Well, that's how it all happens. Well, you see, I've never done it before.
You're doing fine. You've got a lovely touch.
You're always saying that.
Well, that was great, Nellie. You're a natural. Well, I best be off.
Yes, well, I won't forget what you told me when you had me behind there.
Oh, nearest and dearest, we used to love that. I mean, kids, you've done that 6 and 7, but you liked it because it was always the same joke. And there was always one kid in class who got nicknamed Walter. This sort of senile old bloke.
Hello, Lily, Walter. You look a bit puffed, Walter. Has he been running? Jogging? Is it true he's joined the Middleton Harriers?
No, not quite. But it is a fact that he seems to have found his second wind.
Oh, I'm glad of that, because I know you've been looking for it for a long time.
I'm laughing at it now. I can't even... I mean, it was very lowest common denominator, but as kids, you just thought it was fantastic. You know, it was like sort of the Northern Steps, so in a way.
Nearest and Dearest was a massive hit, so much so that it stayed on air long enough to make the transition from black and white to colour. Hilda Baker and Jimmy Jewell, mistress and master of double entendre, were the brightest of stars, but not, it seems, the best of friends.
I was in the canteen one day, Granada's Festival Cafe, sitting at a table with Jimmy. He was eating his lunch and Hilda was sitting over there with a horrible Pekingese lapdog that she had that slathered into the soup, and he looked across and he said, "Ooh, heck," he said, "imagine giving that thing the kiss of life," he said. On the other hand, better that than her.
Get off, will you? He's done it again, all over my doorstep. Do something.
Which one is it this time?
That German sausage dog from next door. That splash hound.
Not splash hound, it's dash hound.
He acts more like a splash hound. I've had to mop and stone that doorstep 3 times this morning.
Oh.
Now look at you, sat sitting there with your shirt hanging out, your shirt lap, and look, showing all your belly button.
Because yours. 500,000, that's it, finished. 500,000. Pardon? Bins. Pardon? I've emptied. It's taken 14 years, 13 weeks, 2 days and 20 minutes each day, week in and week out. 500,000. And what is 500,000, my little sisters? Enough. And what is enough? Bloody enough!
I used to love the Dustbin Men. It was one of the earliest sitcoms I can remember. It always used to start with, "Hey, Mum, what? It's a Dustbin Men."
Hey, Mum!
What?
The Dustbin Men!
The other thing I remember about the Dustbin Men was that they had the most fantastic dustbin van, because it had Thunderbird 3 on the front, which I always thought was a great thought. Not Thunderbird 1 or 2, but Thunderbird 3 was just slightly odd.
Go on, clog me to death, you great buttock. You know I have a delicate skin, I'm bruised very easy.
Sorry.
Cheese and egg. I called you a great buttock.
True.
And you didn't seize me by the throat.
Also true.
And you said you were sorry.
Sorry?
I always remember my favourite joke as well, which was there was a City fan, which is probably the first City fan that I ever saw on television, and somebody asked him why he was a City fan. Was it because he couldn't spell United?
I've just had a frightening experience. You just met Cheese and Egg? Yeah. And he didn't smash your face in? No. He just sort of smiled, sort of bitter-like he were in love with me but knew I was promised to another. It's like Colin Bell suddenly taking up hopscotch.
Many of the early comedies, designed to please a national audience, were set in a parody of the Northwest, the sort of place where a pickling factory might be found at the bottom of the garden, and where, in the case of The Last of the Baskets, you could enter a town called Clogborough and discover that a peerage has been inherited by a working-class dolt.
Please, now that you're members of the aristocracy, your son will have to attain a much higher standard of behaviour.
Yes, of course. Clifford, you take notice of what Mr. Bodkin says. I don't want you showing me up. Give us a fag, come on.
The 60s became the 70s, and their legacy was a diluted version of the decade that had changed the world. The miniskirt was still in, but promiscuity was out. Men could wear their hair long, but were no longer born to be wild, while comedy was allowed to be naughty, so long as it was nice too.
You fancy him, don't you? Who? Geoffrey. Never. You do, Beryl. I do not. N-O spells no. Oh, God, I want to nibble his earlobe.
I mean, The Lovers was an absolute phenomenon. It was one of those... my mum was always trying to make us go to bed because there's a lot of sexual innuendo in it. And I remember when when I did watch it later on, our Mary was mad on it, and she was at Loretto, and all the girls at Loretto, you know, all our Mary's mates, all fancied Richard Beckinsale.
Beryl, do you remember earlier when I mentioned knowing about 20 girls sort of very, very particularly well?
Some men have got it, Geoffrey, and some weren't even in the queue when they were dishing it out.
Well, I think I might have tended to give the impression of having more than I've actually got. I was probably using round figures to illustrate a point.
But The Lovers was fantastic because it was, like, very true of that sort of 70s period, you know, because everyone always talks about the, you know, promiscuous society, but in truth, from working classes were much prudier than that.
About 12. 6.
3.
All the stuff about him trying to get a bit of a snog on the city and the mum coming in the front room and him basically saying, you know, come on, when can we do it? I'm desperate, it's bad for you, you know, it's making me ill. I mean, just brilliant.
Nearly 3.
You mean 2?
Nearly 3. Nearly Monica Dyson. Very nearly Pam Wilde. And very, very nearly a girl I met at Scarborough.
Still to come, find out for whom the bell tolls.
Could I have order, please, while I'm on the phone? Thank you.
And be present at the birth of a comedy icon.
I get so many letters about the Chippendales. What are they? What do they do? Are they normal? Is it safe to go and see them if you've had a hysterectomy?
Those were the days.
Fancy a trip away or a great day out? Find out about destinations right on your doorstep. We search out the attractions that are hot in the Northwest this summer. Join us for Go Northwest 7:30, Thursday on ITV1.
This fella come to our house, he said, do you believe in free speech? I said, I do. He said, can I use your telephone?
The search began for new ways of generating laughter other than the sitcom. Looking back, given the Northwest's long tradition of working men's clubs and stand-up comics, the imaginative leap to give some of them their own show seems but a small one. But in 1971, it was innovation of the highest order.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's The Comedians!
The thing about The Comedians was, it just was great gags, well told.
I should have read you this letter earlier on, actually. It's from my mother. She says, Dear Frank, you've now been away for 3 weeks and we thought you were still in the lavatory. The insurance man called this morning and said, if the last instalment on your granny's funeral isn't paid, up she comes. Since you've left home, your fella has become a sex maniac and tries to make love to me every opportunity he gets. Please excuse the wobbly writing.
People the next day would go into work or the pub or the school and say, hey, did you hear that gag? And even if you'd heard it before, it didn't matter because it was, as Frank Carson used to say...
You've heard them all before, but it's the way I tell it.
I remember comics like Ken Goodwin, who was just daft. He used to say, settle down now, I'm too good for this place.
We're having a good time, aren't we? What about these two fellas in prison and they can't get out? One said to the other, how long are you in for? And his pal said 3 days. So he said, how did you manage that? He said, they hanged me on Monday.
Daft comedy like that.
So they took him across to that place where they do it. And they had to cross this big yard in the teeming rain. And they said to the hangman, what a rotten day to go across here in. And he said, you should worry, because I've got to come back in this lot.
The fellow went to the doctor. He says, well, I've examined you. He said, I can't find nothing wrong with you. He says, you must have Alice. He said, what's that? He said, I don't know, but Christopher Robin went down with it.
I went to see Bernard Manning in Stockport, and I always remember when we watched him tell the most awful jokes that we would never tell. when he wasn't doing stuff that we were, we'd find difficult, the other stuff was fantastic, and his timing was fantastic.
Fella selling seagulls on Blackpool front, £0.50 each. A bloke went up, he said, I'll have a seagull. He says, take that one there. Fella went to the optician, he said, my eyesight's failing. Something wrong with my eyes. He said, come outside. He said, look in the sky, what can you see? He said, I can see the sun. He said, how much further do you want to see?
Good night, milkman's on his way.
New ways of using studios inspired new kinds of comedy. 30 years separate Phoenix Nights from the Wheeltappers and Shunters Social Club, but both found fun in the Northwest tradition of the local club, its variety and speciality acts, and its concert secretary.
Now, we had a group boot called the Red Arrows, and they haven't turned up. Trying to find somewhere to park.
Ladies and gentlemen, two young men that appeared here 15 years ago with very great success, so we just had to bring them back before they went on opportunity knocks. Could I have your best attention for Little and Large?
The Wheeltap and Shunters Club isn't Phoenix Night, because Phoenix Nights, you laugh at the fact that they've seen this, whereas Wheeltap and Shunters Club was the genuine article. But I did enjoy the Wheeltappers and Shunters Club, and I thought it was sort of the revenge of the working classes on the good old days.
Baby, let me be. What? Your loving teddy bear. What? Put a chain around my neck and lead me anywhere. Oh, let me be. Oh, let me be. Oh, teddy bear. Oh.
Some will argue that 15 years wasn't long enough, but the Wheeltappers gave viewers a good night in by capturing the spirit of a good northern night out. As comedy grew ever more important to ITV's schedules, the search for new talent was widened, and shows like The Video Entertainers aimed to put new faces in front of the viewing public. Liverpudlian Mick Miller was one of them, with a routine that imagined a bitter and alcoholic children's entertainer whose radio show included the story of Noddy.
Morning, kids, it's a Noddy show. Are you all listening to your radios? Well, what does Noddy do today? He wakes up, doesn't he? And he goes in the bathroom for a wash. Can you hear Noddy filling the sink with water? Hasn't he got a big sink, eh? Then he goes downstairs for his breakfast. Oh, and he hears a milkman. He pours himself a cup of tea. Forgot the milk, didn't he? Then he got in his car. And he's going on his holidays to Scotty Bottleland. And he sees Mr. Cow and Mr. Sheep's. And he's driving along and his car stopped and Noddy says, oh, my car's won't go. And he phoned the AA man. And the AA man said, what's wrong, eh? Eh?
Sketch shows offered another comedy option, and executives searched hard to put together the right combination of performers. Sometimes, though, the parts turned out to be somehow greater than the whole. We may not remember Alfresco too well, but its stars are now stamped in our memories.
She loves me not. Hello there.
Wish the producer would paint some dots in these prop dominoes. It makes all this pretend background activity extremely boring.
I don't mind. I've won every game.
Yes. My prop crossword was similarly useless, so I had to bring my own, but I'm afraid I'm scuppered all ends up, and rightly so, with this young tinker of a clue here.
When a whole new breed of the new comedians came out, a lot of them were at Manchester University, and you could almost say that Manchester was here in the early 80s, not the late 80s.
Well, it's 8 letters, begins with T. Ruthless, unfeeling dictator who constructs roofs out of dried grass and reeds.
Tony Benn.
Extraordinary, I had no idea he was a craftsman.
The answer, cousin, if you would read your script, is Thatcher.
I know what it says in the script, She's, and I'm just a little bit tired of everyone thinking it's very young and smart and clever to have a go at the Prime Minister. She does a ruddy, difficult job.
Oh, God, let's not talk about politics.
And our fresco got cancelled. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. One of those, you know, sometimes people get it wrong.
'Tis a wild and evil night, Amos.
I should not like to be upon the sea tonight with the swell running the way she is. Puts me in mind of that terrible night, the night the Cornish lady went down on the Captain's Point.
Meanwhile, local programmes, those made specifically for the North West, provided opportunities for purely homegrown talent to master the techniques of the small screen.
Before our next debate, there are a few things that we need to get straight.
Yes, indeed. So we've brought our own agony aunt along, Mrs. Merton, who will give a public health warning about exposure to the latest American craze for macho male strippers. Mrs. Merton!
Thank you, Tony. Do you know, you could have been a Chippendale if you're a little bit younger and a little bit firmer. I get so many letters about the Chippendales. What are they? What do they do? Are they normal? Is it safe to go and see them if you've had a hysterectomy?
For that very first show, we actually had to go and find a big armchair. She sits in the armchair and reads agony aunt letters. And Mrs. Merton is born, and that was fantastic.
Moving swiftly on, a letter from Jack in Liverpool. Dear Mrs. Merton, my wife Sheila wants to go and see the Chippendales, but I don't want her to go as they're so good looking and I'm going a bit thin on top and I've got dentures. Oh, Mrs. Merton, what can I do? Please help me. Older men can be sexy, Jack. We only need to look at Desmond Lynam or John Majors. What you should do is let your wife go and see the Chippendales and then on her return surprise her. You could stand there in your cleanest thermals and a little bit of Old Spice on yourself and fresh corn plasters the lot. And say this little rhyme to her. I may be older and a little slack, but I'll be here when those Chippendales have gone back. And what I've done there for you, Jack, is I've rhymed slack with back.
Next time on Those Were the Days, we explore the archive to find more acorns of mighty success, when we look back across half a century to the days when stars were born.
At 7:15 p.m. on September 22nd, 1955, ITV was born.
Take it, Master Control.
Now in a new 5-part series, Melvyn Bragg looks back at ITV's 50 years.
It was exciting.
Starting with a look at its roots as the channel of the people.
It made everything so light-hearted.
And gave a voice to a lot of people.
Welcome to Opportunity Knocks.
It all goes round in a circle.
The story of ITV. Sunday 10:40 on ITV1.